This week, we're going to talk about how Taiwan just bet $250 billion on America, while the same week, Canada bets the opposite direction. Both are responding to the same uncertainty, and only one is diversifying. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socio-economic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation.
Taiwan's envoy to Canada has criticized Prime Minister Mark Carney and the recent Canada-China trade deal, calling the Canadian strategy naive. Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping last week to sign an agreement cutting reciprocal tariffs and boosting trade. But in an interview with CNA, Taiwan's representative to Canada, Harry Ho-Ren-Zeng, said Carney had misjudged the global situation. He warned that Canada's plan to use China to counter the U.S. could mean they end up losing on both fronts. Zeng also told Bloomberg that China is a state-run economy that can stop buying at any time. Canadian officials say the government strategy is still a work in progress.
President Lai Ching-te is praising the new U.S.-Taiwan trade deal, hailing it as a major victory for Taipei. Speaking at the Commonwealth Economic Forum, Lai addressed the deal for the first time since tariff negotiations with Washington ended. He praised Taiwan's trade negotiators, saying the deal puts Taiwan on a level playing field with Japan, South Korea, and the European Union. The U.S. agreed to lower tariffs on Taiwanese goods from 20 to 15%. In exchange, Taiwan committed up to $500 billion in investments for U.S.-based chip manufacturing, half through private investments and the rest through government-backed credit. But Taiwan's opposition parties have criticized the deal, saying it could hollow out Taiwan's chip industry by shifting production overseas. Lai, pushing back, says the deal is in line with Taiwanese companies' global expansion strategy. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC has been generally supportive of the new agreement, saying its U.S. expansion is driven by customer demand and that its most advanced manufacturing processes will remain in Taiwan. Traditional export industries, which may benefit from lower tariffs, have also supported the move.
Taiwan's cabinet is pitching a new agreement with Washington as more than just a trade deal, framing it as a strategic partnership between two tech giants. In their first press conference since returning from the U.S., the deal's negotiators made their case to the public. The deal commits Taiwan to up to $500 billion in U.S. investment, $250 billion in private direct investments, and another $250 billion in government-backed credit for Taiwan's chip industry to invest there. In exchange, the U.S. lowers Taiwan's tariff rate from 20 to 15%, and most chips can enter the U.S. without tariffs if those companies are building in the U.S. But pushback to the deal has centered on concerns that the move will diminish Taiwan's role in supply chains. Taiwan's vice premier says not to worry. Vice Premier Zheng even debuted a new English catchphrase for the proposed partnership, harking back to a well-known phrase used by Taiwan during the COVID-19 pandemic.
过去我们说 Taiwan can help， 我们期待未来是 Taiwan US can lead.
The deal will soon go to the legislature for a vote, where the opposition-led majority have been publicly critical. Neither of Taiwan's main opposition parties responded to our requests for comment. But we're likely to hear more soon from the opposition, and it's hard to tell if the cabinet's messaging this morning moved the needle with them.
Last Thursday, Taiwan finalized a tariff deal with the United States. Tariffs on Taiwanese goods dropped from 20% to 15%. In exchange, Taiwanese semiconductor, electronics, AI, and energy companies committed to investing $250 billion in America, and the government added another $250 billion in credit guarantees, $500 billion locked into a single partnership. The same week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, the first Canadian leader to visit Beijing since 2017, struck a deal slashing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles from 100% down to just over 6%. China, in turn, is cutting tariffs on Canadian canola from 84% to 15%. Now, when reporters asked Carney whether China was more predictable than the United States, he didn't hesitate. He said, in terms of the way our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable, and you see results coming from that. So 2 American allies, 2 very different bets, and here's the question. Is Taiwan making the smartest move in its economic history or walking through a one-way door? So let's start with the good news because there's a lot of it. Taiwan's economy in 2025 was, by almost any measure, historic. The Zhanghua Institution for Economic Research estimate GDP growth hit 7.43%, the kind of number that makes other developed countries jealous. Export orders reached $743 billion, up 26% from the previous year. And that's the first time Taiwan has ever broken the $700 billion mark. December alone saw export orders of $76 billion, up nearly 40% year on year. The 11th consecutive month of double-digit growth. The labor market follows suit. Unemployment dropped to 3.35%, the lowest in 25 years. Labor force participation hit 59%, a 36-year high. And average wages climbed to 47,000 new Taiwan dollars, or about there, approximately $1,500 per month, up more than 3%. And that's the strongest growth in 26 years. The engine behind all of this, of course, is artificial intelligence. The information and communication sector saw exports orders jump 35.7%. Electronics, which includes semiconductors, surged 37.9%. Together, these two sectors now account for over 70% of Taiwan's total export orders. And the outlook for 2026 remains pretty strong. CIER forecasts 4.14% growth, with AI hardware demand expected to stay robust. Server shipments for NVIDIA's GB200 and GB300 systems are projected to nearly triple this year, from about 25,000 units to 70,000 units. You have Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, all doubling their orders. Taiwan isn't just participating in the AI boom, Taiwan is the boom. So when the tariff deal came through, 15% instead of 20%, no stacking on existing rates, it felt like confirmation that Taiwan has navigated the uncertainty and the bet on America was paying off. But here's where we need to look closer at what Taiwan actually agreed to. The headline was tariff relief. The substance was something much larger. Under the hood of that agreement, Taiwanese companies committed to investing $250 billion directly into the U.S. Semiconductors, electronics, manufacturing, AI infrastructure, energy. And the government is backing this with another $250 billion in credit guarantees. Essentially, if the companies themselves don't have the money to invest, the government is putting that money forward, which means that in total, there is a solid $500 billion going over the Pacific Ocean. That's $500 billion flowing in just one direction. TSMC alone accounted for a significant chunk of that. The company already has $65 billion committed to building these 3 fabs in Arizona, with the first entering commercial production in late 2024. Now, there's another $100 billion pledged for 3 more fabs, 2 IC assembly plants, and a research and development center. Equipment installation at the 2nd Arizona fab is already underway. Construction on the 3rd has begun. They're already applying for permits on the 4th. Global Wafers, Taiwan's silicon wafer giant, opened its first 12-inch fab in Sherman, Texas last May. Now, Chairperson Doris Hsu says they've begun design work for Phase 2, part of a planned $7.5 billion total investment in the state. And then there is Power Chip Semiconductor Manufacturing Corp, PSMC. Last week, the company announced it's selling its P5 fab in Miaoli County to Micron for $1.8 billion. Simultaneously, PSMC is raising about 26 billion NT dollars, that's roughly $800 million through a global depository receipt offering. Chairperson Frank Huang said the company will reorganize production resources to focus on AI applications. 3D AI DRAMs, wafers-on-wafer technology, silicon interposers. This isn't just trade normalization. This is a structural integration of Taiwan's industrial capacity into the American economy. And the question isn't whether the money is flowing, it's whether the door swings both ways. Now, this brings us back to Canada. Mark Carney became prime minister in a political environment not unlike Taiwan's, caught between an unpredictable America and a China eager to court any willing partner. His response was diversity. So his response was to diversify. The deal Carney struck in Beijing last week reversed years of hostility. Under his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, Canada had imposed 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, matching American penalties. China retaliated with tariffs on over $2.6 billion worth of Canadian agricultural products, and Canadian exports to China dropped 10.4% in 2025. Now, Chinese EVs entering Canada at 6.1%, most favored nation rates. The quota starts at 49,000 vehicles, rising to about 70,000 over 5 years. In return, China is slashing tariffs on Canadian canola seed from 84% to around 15% and removing anti-discrimination tariffs on canola meal, lobster, crab, and peas. Carney says the deal unlocks nearly $3 billion in export orders for Canadian farmers and fishers. The strategic logic is clear. Given current complexities in Canada's trade relationship with the U.S., it's no surprise that Carney's government is keen to improve the bilateral trade and investment relationship with Beijing. That's what one analyst noted. Here's the remarkable part. Trump actually approved. When asked about the Canadian and Chinese deal, he told reporters that's what he should be doing. It's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that. Okay, so Canada looked at American unpredictability and decided to hedge. Taiwan, on the other hand, looked at the same unpredictability and decided to double down. Both strategies are rational responses to the same problem, but only one of them has a plan B. I don't think I need to tell you which one that is. So why didn't Taiwan diversify? Well, the short answer is it can't. Not really. Canada can pivot because it has options. It exports canola, lobster, liquefied natural gas, commodities China wants and Americans doesn't monopolize. When Trump threatens tariffs or jokes about annexation, Canada can credibly signal that it has other buyers. That's leverage. Taiwan's leverage is semiconductors. That's it. TSMC alone commands over 90% of the world's most advanced chip production, and the concentration is precisely what makes Taiwan indispensable to America, and precisely what makes diversification towards China politically impossible. The very asset that gives Taiwan bargaining power locks it into a single partner. And the partner keeps asking for more. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told CNBC that Washington aims to bring 40% of Taiwan's semiconductor supply chain to the United States before Trump's term ends in 2029. Taiwan's CIER president pushed back, noting that realistically less than 15% of TSMC's advanced processes will be on American soil by then. He says the construction timelines simply don't allow for more. But even 15% represents a historic shift, and with each fab built in Arizona, Taiwan's leverage subtly changes. From you need us where we are to we're already building where you want us. Lian cautioned the public not to be, quote, alarmed or discouraged by Lutnick's rhetoric, noting that similar pressure tactics have been used on Japan and South Korea. That's true, but it's also true that this pressure isn't going away. The $250 billion commitment isn't a one-time transaction. It's the beginning of a structural renegotiation where Taiwan's most valuable industry lives. So Taiwan isn't the only economy making big bets right now, but it might be the only one betting so heavily on a single outcome. And anyone who is anybody in the stock markets or has the wealth over, let's say, a few $1 million will tell you that when it comes to investment, diversification is key. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, they tell you. Take Korea. The government just launched what is calling the AI Squid Game, a national competition to develop sovereign AI capabilities. Losing teams don't just exit, they have their GPU allocations and data resources confiscated. The winner gets full state backing to build a Korean answer to ChatGPT or DeepSeek. It's aggressive, even ruthless, but it's also a hedge, reducing dependence on any single foreign partner for crucial AI infrastructure. India is moving too. Tata Group announced an $11 billion investment to build an AI innovation city near Mumbai, aiming to attract talent and compete with Singapore and Malaysia for data center business. The goal is to make India a node in the global AI supply chain, not just a consumer of other countries' technology. And even China, despite its current tension with the West, diversifies its customer base while building dominance in green energy. Chinese companies now control 60 to 70% of global production in solar modules, lithium batteries, and wind equipment. That concentration is strategic, but the customers are global. Taiwan's own government recognizes the need to move up the value chain. The Lai administration unveiled a 1.5 trillion new Taiwan dollars, about 47 billion US dollars, AI blueprint, emphasizing sovereign AI development, talent cultivation, and application beyond hardware. Now, the ambition is here, but the bulk of Taiwan's chips, financial and literal, remain on the table in front of a single player. That's the US. The tariff deal locked in lower rates. It also locked in a direction. As the global AI race accelerates, Taiwan is betting that being indispensable to America will be enough, and it can't really make a turn even if it wants to. Everyone else is betting that they need options. Here's what kept me thinking about Carney's comment. He didn't say China was a better partner. He said China was a more predictable partner. You see results coming from that, he said. Predictability matters when you're making decade-long investments. TSMC's Arizona commitment stretches to 2030 and beyond. Global Wafers is planning multiple phases in Texas. These aren't decisions you can reverse if the political winds shift. And the winds shift constantly. It's just this past month, Trump threatened European allies with tariffs over Greenland, then backed off after a framework agreement. He's openly pressuring the Federal Reserve on interest rates while dangling hints about his preferred successor to Chair Jerome Powell. Markets swing on his posts. The Taiwan stock market dropped over 500 points in a single session last week after Trump's Greenland tariff threats, rattling investors, even though Taiwan wasn't directly involved. The economic data suggests a world that is increasingly comfortable with uncertainty. Global fund managers surveyed by Bank of America say they've shifted from expecting a soft landing to expecting no landing at all, an economy that just keeps growing without the Fed needing to intervene. Risk appetite is a multi-year high. Almost half of surveyed investors say they have zero hedges against a stock market downturn because how can you hedge against a rocket ship? But investor optimism and geopolitical stability aren't the same thing. Taiwan's $250 billion US dollars commitment assumes that American priorities will remain stable for a decade or more, that the partner demanding 40% of the supply chain today won't demand 60% tomorrow or change the terms entirely after the fabs are built. Or will they still be a global superpower after, say, a decade? Canada looked at that bet and decided to diversify. Taiwan looked at the same bet and went all in. The chips are on the table and the wheel is spinning, and we're about to flip that river cart very soon. So finally, Taiwan's economic triumph in 2025 was real. The AI boom is real. The strategic importance is real, but so is this. Taiwan has committed $250 billion to a partnership with a country whose own allies are hedging against its unpredictability. Maybe that's visionary clarity, the recognition that in fragmenting world, being essential to the dominant power is the safest position, or maybe it's a one-way door, walk through before anyone fully mapped what's on the other side. But I will say this, given Taiwan's geopolitical situation and its relationship with China, it doesn't really have any other choice right now for the direction that the current administration has been going in. Canada just showed there is another path. Whether Taiwan could take it or even want to is a different question. Thank you for listening to the show. I'm Joey Chow. Tune in next week to find out more about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation.